Dan Grassa in for Stephen A. It's the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN Live from South Bend this Friday. Covering the USC Notre Dame matchup. It's part of ESPN Radio's Fall Football Tour, brought to you by Marathon. Get 5 cents off every gallon every day with Make It Count rewards from Marathon. To sign up, visit makeitcount.com or download the free app. And download the Vivid Seats app and enter promo code ESPN25 at checkout to get 10% off your next order. Don't buy just any seat. Get a Vivid seat. Baseball, the name of the game, as you could imagine today, off of the 2 National League games last night. We got a Game 5 tonight on the AL side with the Astros and Rays, a game that can hear right on ESPN Radio beginning at 6:30. And who better to talk about all that and then some with than our next guest. He knows a thing or two about October baseball. Former All-Star, of course, and now our ESPN MLB analyst, Mark Teixeira, who's kind enough to give me a couple of minutes here. Mark, it's Dan Grassa. Thanks for joining me. How are you?
I'm great, Dan. You?
Oh, no complaints. How could you after that game last night? Let me ask it to you this way. Do you think the Nationals won the game, or do you think the Dodgers lost the game?
Well, I think the Nationals won the game because I always want to give credit to the team that comes through. I mean, you don't hit 2 home runs off Clayton Kershaw, then a grand slam in extra innings and not deserve the win. So the Nationals deserve the win. That being said, I mean, this is a game that the Dodgers had to win. You know, when you have a 2-run lead going into the 8th inning with a rested bullpen, you just got to figure out, at home, you got to figure out a way to win that ball game.
The definition of insanity, more or less, is doing the same thing over and over and over again to pretty much the same results and the same outcome. The affinity for using Clayton Kershaw in the month of October, is that loyalty, or does it now border on insanity when you keep getting diminished returns?
Dan, it's bordering on insanity. I did Golic and Wingo yesterday morning, and they asked me, what are the chances that we see Clayton Kershaw in Game 5? And I said, well, if you're a Dodgers fan, you don't want to see Clayton Kershaw. The reason I said that is Walker Buehler is the ace of the staff. If he goes 6 or 7 innings, then you have a fully rested bullpen that is completely capable of getting 6 or 9 outs. So what happens last night? We had an opportunity now, I don't mind Clayton Kershaw going in and getting the 1 out against Adam Eaton. You know what? There's not a lot of lefties in the bullpen. You know, you might have wanted to, leave Adam Kolarek for Juan Soto later in the 8th. So I get him going in there for 1 out. To bring him back in the 8th, when you had Kenley Jansen and Pedro Baez and Kenta Maeda and Dustin May and all these guys just sitting there in the bullpen, I'm thinking, man, this just doesn't feel right to me. And I was watching the game, and it's like watching a car accident in slow motion. You just couldn't look at it and not feel queasy for Clayton Kershaw and the Dodgers.
And, of course, hindsight being what it is, you say, well, you had to take him out of the game. And I was saying it earlier, as soon as he got Eaton to strike out, you know what? The emotion was high, place was going crazy, but job well done. And Dave Roberts should have shook his hand and said, all right, we'll turn this thing over to the pen. As you said, you had a multitude of options that were rested out there that would have been good alternatives. And to make matters worse, he goes out there and serves up the gopher ball the next inning to Rendon. Then you leave him in to pitch to Soto. And I know that it was lefty-lefty and everything, but, I mean, that is strike 2 there for even giving him the chance to face Soto after the home run.
You're exactly right. And, I think one of the things that this shows is that the Dodgers love Clayton Kershaw. I'm talking about the organization. They absolutely love him. This is not Dave Roberts' sole decision. And when you have a Game 5 and you have a day off, there's meetings before the game, and it's the front office, and it's the statisticians and sabermetrics guys, and it's the coaching staff, and they go through everything that could happen in a game, right? If I'm the Dodgers, the only way Clayton Kershaw gets in that game last night, or at least pitches into the 8th inning, is if your starter, Walker Buehler, does not pitch well, or something crazy happens in the game where we go 15 innings and you got to use him for multiple innings. Get him out of that game after the 1 out, leave him on a positive, get 6 outs. You could have mixed and matched every single batter for the next 6 outs, and you're going on to the LCS with maybe a confident Clayton Kershaw, and you're at home.
And they know him better than everybody else does, Mark. I mean, you and I and baseball observers everywhere know that he's not the same as he was, let's say, 3-4 years ago. These guys see him every single day. They could probably attest to it as well. And, that's why that loyalty gets in the way, and it ended up burning them to a certain degree. And then you look at later on with Joe Kelly. I mean, to me, that is not a hill that I am willing to die on, to where my entire offseason now is going to be thought on Joe Kelly, bringing him out for a second inning of work when he's not a 2-inning pitcher and hasn't been for at least the last few months. I mean, that to me was as big of a head scratcher as anything else.
Makes zero sense. So you had Dustin May sitting there in the bullpen. You had Kenley Jansen sitting there in the bullpen. Now, those guys, they threw 5 innings combined and gave up 1 run in the LDS. And they were sitting on the bench watching Joe Kelly load the bases and give up a grand slam to Howie Kendrick. So, again, another thing about this is that when you think big picture, if I'm a manager of a team, I know I'm going to need my entire bullpen if I'm actually going to win a World Series. You can try to stick with 1 or 2 guys in an LDS, but eventually you have to rely on the rest of your bullpen to win 4 games in an LCS and 4 games in a World Series. So it just doesn't show a lot of confidence in the rest of the guys. And, maybe the Dodgers just weren't good enough. I know Dodgers fans don't want to hear that. Oh, we had the best team, and, the bullpen blew it, and Dave Roberts blew it. Well, maybe you just didn't have the best team out there, because if you did have the best team, you would have been able to figure out a way to get 6 outs at the end of the game.
You played this game long enough. You were on really good teams. I mean, it's hard to win when you're in October. Sometimes it's a crapshoot, and there's a reason why it's been since the 1940s where we had a team in the National League go to 3 straight World Series. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. So Dodgers came up short when, as far as that is concerned here. If you were the guy making the decisions, and I know that he just got a nice contract extension last year, but you giving any thought to not bringing back Dave Roberts?
No, and this is the reason. I think Dave Roberts is a great soldier for the Dodgers organization. I think after the last 2 seasons of disappointment in the World Series, where there's lots of second guessing, and in today's day and age where we have so much information and everybody's got a blog and a Twitter account and giving their opinions, everything is going to be second guessed. That being said, whatever criticism that Dave Roberts got last year, he still got a contract extension. And so the team looks at Dave Roberts and says, this is the right guy to implement our plan. And our plan going into Game 5 was get Kershaw in the game, lean on a guy like Joe Kelly, and don't use Kenley Jansen. So it's not Dave Roberts' fault. It's almost like shooting the messenger. I think Dave Roberts just executed the plan that was put in front of him. I'm not saying that he doesn't have autonomy with certain things, and maybe keeping Joe Kelly in the game was a mistake. But Dave Roberts is still a very good manager. His players love him. And there's 8 managerial openings right now.
Yeah.
Are there 8 guys better than Dave Roberts right now? I don't think so. So I don't want to see a change there in the dugout.
I agree with you. And there's more to just managing. You got to manage personalities, manage the clubhouse, and the guys in there love him. And he's been successful by and large. And I agree with you. When you have all of this data and everything that gets applied with the organizations from the top all the way down to the dugout there, sometimes the manager, I don't want to say that he's a puppet, but he's almost like a mouthpiece more than anything else. And I think that Dave Roberts a little bit falls victim to that. So I probably wouldn't look to make a change either, Mark. We're talking with Mark Teixeira, ESPN baseball analyst here on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Let's tip our cap to the Washington Nationals. After all, they did win the game, as we know. And Rendon's going to get credit. Soto gets credit. Howie Kendrick, guys like that. But let's not forget Steven Strasburg, because this is a guy who now has firmly established himself, as far as I'm concerned, as a true big game pitcher. His October resume speaks for itself. The fact that he struggled in those first couple of innings but still settled down and kept the damage to a minimum allowed the Nationals to get back in the game in the later innings.
That's the mark of an ace right there, Dan. So Look at the difference between what happened to Steven Strasburg in Game 1 and what happened to Mike Fulton. I'm sorry, in Game 5, and what happened to Mike Fultonavich in the Braves Game 5. You had a little bit of adversity. And Steven Strasburg, after a 2-run homer in the first inning and the Dodger faithful are going crazy, he could have packed it in and that game could have been over. He bared down and gave the team exactly what they needed. Mike Foltynewicz, after the error to Freddie Freeman, he was done. He was absolutely done, and every pitch was flat. He was missing over the middle of the plate. It looked like he was throwing batting practice after that error that could have ended the inning for the Braves. And so, give Strasburg a ton of credit. You know, a lot of the criticism from Steven Strasburg is because of what happened in 2012, which, by the way, was out of his control. You know, he had the team, and he had his agent Scott Boras say, you know what? The guy's coming off of Tommy John surgery. We don't want to pitch him too much. Let's limit his innings. And I think that if he would have pitched in the playoffs in 2012, if they could have figured out a way to limit his innings during that season, the Nationals had the best team on paper in 2012. You know, they could have won a World Series that year. So Steven Strasburg has kind of righted the ship from a public perception, and deservedly so, because he is an outstanding pitcher.
Absolutely. And, you know, he gets, you know, remember a couple of years ago, again, that series against the Chicago Cubs, remember when word trickled out the night before that he wasn't feeling well, he had the sniffles, he had a little bit of a head cold, and he wasn't going to make that start. And then fast forward a few hours later, he took the ball, and he was phenomenal. So, you know, maybe that's something, too, that people just that don't want to forget, but yet he went out there and he still delivered. That is a true ace right there, and I think he's been the Nationals' best pitcher from start to finish, so we'll see what type of role he's going to play here moving forward for them. As far as their opponent, though, with the Cardinals, you know, yesterday was a laugher. You don't get too many of those, especially in a clinching situation, and really the only talking point from that game yesterday, do you have any issue with Mike Shildt sticking with Flaherty as long as he did, because the game was already in their back pocket? Now Flaherty is only going to be able to pitch game 3, so one start probably in the first 6 games of that LCS.
I don't have a problem with it because baseball is a funny game. And the last thing I want to do is mess up the rhythm of a game where I'm up 10-0. And so you also have to realize that when starting pitchers, when they get hot, when you go through your entire pregame routine, when you pitch 2 or 3 innings early, it's not like, oh, well, if I take him out, it's like he didn't pitch today. He still pitched, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like all of a sudden he can come back in game 1 and start game 1 in the NLCS. So I have no problem with that. Carl Ravitch actually texted me right away in the bottom of the first inning. He said, hey, after this inning, you know, do you take out Flaherty because they're up 10-0? I said, absolutely not. You win the game. You stick with what you've done because, again, it sends a message to your team that I believe in you guys. We're here for a reason. We won the NL Central. We won this division series, and we're going to stick to our plan, the same plan that we've used all year long, and Jack Flaherty's going to finish this game, get the W, and we're going to move on to the championship series.
And you look at it from a Braves perspective now. This was a big opportunity that they let slip through their fingers. I mean, you're at home. It's Game 5. When they won the NL East last year, that kind of came out of nowhere. You gave them a pass when the playoffs roll around. This time, they came back. They won the division again. So this youthful group with the prior postseason experience, to let this one really just kind of get away from them. Now the pressure is going to be on this group moving forward here, Mark, and you expect them to start winning some of these bigger games.
No doubt, and you look at the Braves haven't won a division series since 2001.
Crazy.
And they lost in the NLCS that year to the Diamondbacks, but man, that's a long time, and there have been a lot of really good Braves teams that have faltered in the NLDS, and then a wild card game with the crazy pop-up infield fly rule against the Cardinals as well. So the Braves fans have had a lot of heartbreak. I spent a lot of time in Atlanta, and so I feel the pain. I had a bunch of buddies that were at the game that they left in the 3rd or 4th inning because it was so depressing. That being said, the Braves are well positioned for a nice window here, for a nice run. That being said, I think the Braves have to figure out who they are, you know, who their best pitchers are, because their Game 2 starter, Mike Foltynewicz, he can be great and he can stink, right? He got sent down this year.
Yep.
Their Game 3 starter, Mike Soroka, might have been their best pitcher.
How does he only get one start in this series, Mark?
So the word is that he's so much better on the road, but that's a first guess from my standpoint. And I love Dallas Keuchel. I think his experience is great. But guess what? In the postseason, I'll take talent over experience all day long. And I want my best pitchers pitching the most innings. And you saw, this is what I didn't like about the Braves postseason. Game 1, you saw that they didn't have a ton of trust in Dallas Keuchel. He gave up a couple soft hits and 1 run in 3 innings, and he got yanked.
Yeah.
And that first game set the tone for the series between him getting yanked early, Chris Martin going down with an oblique injury, and Ronald Acuna forgetting how to play baseball and not hustling. It just set a very bad tone for the rest of the series. They lost a bunch of leads. They, obviously couldn't get it done in Game 5. It just didn't seem like a very crisp and clean brand of baseball, but I expect the Braves to come back better next season.
And I'll tell you, you look at it on the flip side, the Cardinals, they were 4 outs away from elimination in game number 4, and it's the usual cast of characters that seem like they've been there for about 30 years. Yadi Molina, Adam Wainwright, these guys right in the middle of everything, and that's why you can't count this team out moving forward, even against the Nationals here.
Absolutely not. This Cardinals team is eerily similar to the one in 2011 that only won 90 games during the regular season, was a wild card team, but caught fire and won the World Series. And remember, they were one strike away twice to losing that World Series to the Texas Rangers and come back with the David Freese heroics.
Yep.
I mean, that's the type of team that the Cardinals are. I think there's a few uniforms when you put it on, it just means something different. When you put on the Yankee pinstripes, I know it, I felt it. You feel the history and the crowd and the city. St. Louis is that team. And it always seems like they're in a series, they're in a game, never count them out. And it doesn't hurt to have Jack Flaherty, who was the best pitcher in all of baseball the second half of the season. And Paul Goldschmidt and Marcell Ozuna were absolutely fabulous in the division series. I mean, those guys carried that team. They hit the only 4 runs. I mean, this team only hit 4 home runs in 5 games, which, in 2019 is a complete anomaly. That never happens anymore, right? They were the ones that hit those 4 home runs. They were huge. I do not count out this Cardinals team.
And think about it, the way it all fell into place for the Cardinals, too. They finished with the 4th best record in the National League, and they're going to get home field advantage in the LCS. It's funny. ESPN analyst Mark Teixeira joining us for a couple more minutes here on the Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. Let's look ahead to tonight's game. Fascinating with the Rays and the Stros. And as we saw last night, anything can happen in a winner-take-all game. I don't know if you've heard this statistic, though. The last 5 Game 5s of the League Division Series, the road team has won. So that's a feather in the cap for the Tampa Bay Rays. But Glasnow, Cole, both of these pitchers extremely capable, as you know. How much do you think the home field advantage is going to play into it tonight?
I don't think the home field advantage means anything. I really don't. I watched the Tampa Bay Rays in person, beat the Oakland A's in the wild card game. When everyone on our Baseball Tonight set said, "Man, look at this crowd. There's 50,000 strong going to be here tonight. It's a tough place to play." And they go out there and they wax the A's. And then they go into Houston. Yeah, they lose the first 2 games, but they played really well those first 2 games. I mean, the Game 2 especially could have gone either way with a big hit or, a big out here or there. So I think you can't underestimate the Rays also because they have nothing to lose. They had the 30th ranked payroll in baseball this year, and they're going up against a team that on paper is the best team of the last 25 years. I mean, you look at that roster, the only team that I think you can really compare it to is the 98 Yankees that had a historically great season. I wouldn't have been surprised if the Astros went out there and swept every series of the postseason because of how good they are on paper. But we know that the game's not played on paper. And the Rays understand that. They are not going to be scared tonight. They have a guy in Tyler Glasnow that has filthy stuff.
Great.
Gerrit Cole throws 100 with the dirty slider. Guess who else throws 100 with the dirty slider? Tyler Glasnow. So I think this is going to be a great game.
I agree with you. And, Glasnow got off to a great start this season before he went down with injury and kind of sidetracked him a little bit, though. But it's funny because the first 2 games of this series with Verlander and Cole down in Houston, the Rays couldn't touch him, and you thought that this was going to be a sweep. So the fact that we even have a game number 5 is surprising in that sense. Let me ask you this from a guy who had to face a lot of tough pitchers over the years, especially in a series. Okay, we know about the 1-2 with Verlander, with Cole. It's almost like a modern-day Randy Johnson, Curt Schilling, what they were for the Diamondbacks there, right around that 2001 period. How much confidence would it give you, would it give that Rays team, the fact that they got to Verlander and won a game the other night, now being faced with the challenge of going up against Cole? Does the performance against Verlander from the previous game have any carryover into tonight?
I think it does, and I think we're going to see that in the first 2 innings. Because if you can get to Gerrit Cole early, like you got to Verlander early, then that's the key. If you let Gerrit Cole settle in and it's the third or fourth inning and you look up at the scoreboard and you have one hit and you're down 3-0, that can deflate a team a little bit. But if you look at what they did against Verlander in Game 4, they jumped on him early. They got outs early. Charlie Morton did a great job of shutting down the Astros offense. And let's not forget that the Astros offense hasn't exactly been amazing this series. So they have room for improvement as well. But I agree. I think the Verlander win, the runs that they scored early off him, can give you a little bit of a carryover effect in Game 5.
Mark, this was a blast. Really appreciate it. Let's hope tonight we get a good one as well. Appreciate the time as always. We'll catch up again soon.
Lots of fun, Dan.
All right, there's Mark Teixeira, our ESPN MLB analyst. I'll tell you a group of fans that aren't going to want any part of that game tonight, and those are Pittsburgh Pirates fans. Like, if you're a Pirates fan and you're still into the playoffs, when that game starts tonight, you're going to pull the covers over your head, and you're not going to be able to look because Tyler Glasnow, Gerrit Cole, those guys should still be wearing Pirate uniforms, and the fact that they're pitching a winner-take-all game with a right to go to the League Championship Series got to make you cringe if you're a fan of the Buccos. But this should be a fun game tonight. I picked the Astros to win the series way back at the beginning of the year. I picked them to go all the way, and as Mark was just alluding to there, this team is the best team on paper. I'm shocked, and this is to take nothing away from Tampa Bay. I'm shocked that we're even talking about a game number 5, but until I see with my own eyes and I see this team go out there and beat Cole and Verlander back-to-back like they're being asked to do, I think it'll be a close one tonight, but I think that the Astros are going to find a way to march on and to really set up a blockbuster League Championship Series against the New York Yankees. Now, we all love a night out, whether it's seeing our favorite band in person or being there in the crowd to cheer on our